You'll find information about tactile books and the practicalities of making them in other videos, but here we're going to look at how to choose a topic and some important design guidelines. Now, topics. A lot of people think that the easiest way forward is going to look for a nice published mainstream children's book and then make a tactile version of it. But actually, that's probably the hardest thing to do. You're going with a story which has been written. Some parts of the story are not going to lend themselves very easily to a tactile illustration. And the danger is that you're going to look at the pictures in that nice picture book and you're going to produce a raised version of the picture. It all gets much too busy, much too detailed, and you're producing a raised visual picture. Whereas ideally, in a tactile book, you think, what's tactile in this situation? What would it smell like? What would it feel like? And you go along that route. So your illustrations are going to be quite different. Given that you can often choose exactly how you'd like to make a tactile book and what your topic's going to be, you can let your imagination run riot and make up your own book. It could be something simple, my day, getting dressed, or a trip to the park, everyday things, and pick a small item. If you're talking about going to the bathroom, you could just have a bit of toweling, brushing your teeth, that sort of thing. Traditional stories are a rich source of wonderful tales, and you can make tactile versions of them. Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks. There are also stories from other cultures. There are, of course, lots of fairy stories that we share with other European countries, but then there are the Anansi stories, Anansi the Spider-Man, and Mullah Nasruddin, and there are lots of fantastical stories about him. It would be lovely to have some more tactile books made around these characters. Or you can make up your own story. This is not as hard as it sounds. We're not talking about writing something like Harry Potter. We're talking about a simple, funny story that you know will appeal to children. Another way forward, which I think is perhaps the easiest in some ways, is to gather a load of bits. This is just some of my enormous collection of random bits gathered over years from pound shops and charity shops. Look away if you are not a fan of spiders. All sorts of bits and pieces. They're not all soft and slippery. They are hard, they make noises. I've got a magnet. I've got some creepy crawlies, always appealing. I've got an ear. When I found this huge spider, I thought that would be really great because I happen to know that I've got a small spider. So if we were talking large and small, or we were talking counting, or all sorts of stories you might make up about a spider, starting with something as wonderful and tactile as this creature here. A whole book was written about a pond through the seasons because I found these rather lovely dragonflies in Paper Chase, I think it was. You can introduce sounds with castanets or all sorts of bits and pieces that make a noise, rubber bands that can be plucked. I've got a selection of bells here, and interestingly, not only does this big bell feel bigger than the little bell, it also sounds bigger. Following this, look, I can't stop without showing these fantastic legs. What sort of story could you write about a pair of legs like that? Cherries, replica food. Look, a Rivita. I found these in a pound shop. They're coasters, of course, but when you've got two of them, you could have a round coaster and you could find the odd one out. Or you could use just one of them with something very smooth, and then you've got the contrast between rough and smooth. Or if you wanted to write a story about the three little pigs, you've got your house made of straw almost there. This is the easiest way, I think, to find some bits and pieces to let your imagination run riot and to create something. But you're not, as I said, you're not just producing a raised picture. Let me just show you briefly Little Red Riding Hood. It's not like the print copy. If you think of the Ladybird Little Red Riding Hood with its pictures, this tactile version is quite different. We've got the wolf in bed. We've got the wolf running out of the door. These aren't the same as the print pictures at all. They're designed to be amusing and interesting and interactive for a blind child. If we were designing a book, we might start with a blank page. Let's imagine we're designing a book about Freddie the Fly and his journey through the countryside, and so we start with a tree. Now that looks fine. That's a good start. But actually, this is a tree made of felt. It's so inviting to use felt because it's so easy to cut and it doesn't fray and it's cheap and it comes in all colours. But actually it's really dull to feel felt, and tree trunks don't feel like felt and leaves don't feel like felt. So let's abandon that one and start again with something a bit more tree-like. Now for the trunk here, I've used car mat, doormat actually, that sort of, it's very, very rough on the back, and I've cut it up and it feels, you can hear it, it's rough. And for the leaves, I've used kite fabric, which is quite rustly and much more interesting to feel. So there we have our tree. And I'm going to put a couple of sheep on. There's one, and there's the other, and they're clustering together as sheep do in a flock. But actually it doesn't work like that. If a child is feeling this and exploring it by touch only, they're too close together. It feels like one long sheep with 8 legs. So we need to have them a bit further apart, so there's a good gap between them so you can feel them, you can count their legs. They're quite distinct. Now the main character in this story is Freddie the Fly. And look, I found a brilliant plastic fly with wings and all. He's the business. And he comes zooming in. And what impression does that give a child who's discovering the world by touch? It gives them the impression that your average fly is considerably larger than a sheep's head. And that is actually quite terrifying. So we can't do that. It won't work. He's a great fly and they're great sheep. He will have to appear on a separate page, perhaps with just the sheep's ear and the fly coming in and landing on the sheep's ear. So that, I mean, it's not strictly in proportion here. This is rather a small tree, but we've got to get it approximately right. And we've got to use appropriate textures, not too many things on the page so that there's big gaps between and the child can explore each of them separately. So there's my country scene, but actually if a child has a little bit of sight, we could do better in terms of colour contrast. The sheep is creamy white, the paper is creamy white. So let's abandon that and see how we get on with a different colour. Better, but not great. That's better, I think. Now we don't want either to put the sheep wandering across in front of the tree, because if you're feeling that sheep, it feels like there's something strange sticking out of his back. Perspective is very much a visual thing. The child may learn about it later, but at this sort of level, we're keeping it super easy and super easy to understand. Now the sheep are here. Sometimes sheep stand in such a way you can only see 2 of their legs, but if we're doing sheep, We want to have all 4 legs because sheep have 4 legs. The child can find all 4 legs, and that makes them easier to recognise, and it's all part of the learning process. If you're doing a person, you might do them standing up with their legs slightly apart, their arms slightly out. We don't usually stand like that, but it makes it much easier to actually identify that's a person. I can feel the arms and the legs. If you're showing a face, make sure that you show the face full on so that you can identify the nose, the ears, the eyes and the mouth, or perhaps do it in profile so that you can find the nose and the mouth and the chin. If you're portraying a hand, you might want to show it like this so that each of the fingers and the thumb can be counted. Another popular aspect of tactile books is making it interactive. In Little Red Riding Hood, the child is confronted with a page like this. You can just feel the big ears, and then you can lift the flap and there's the face and the eyes, and then you can lift another flap and there's the mouth and the teeth. All of this action is a lot of fun and helps children with their skills of manipulating things. When you're making a tactile book, the number one thing is to keep feeling it. We can get very carried away with what it looks like, and we can convince ourselves that a piece of bright pink felt and a piece of black suede are so different, but actually if you feel them, they're not that different at all. You need to keep feeling it. You need to ask friends to blindfold themselves and feel it and see what they can make of it. These young children with little or no sight, they're not going to be geniuses, and they don't have the memory bank of pictures that we all have. So they don't really know what they're looking for. We have to make it really simple and straightforward for them, and we can't hide behind the idea that, oh, these children have no sight, so they're super duper at interpreting things by touch. Not so. They may be getting there, but they're very young and in the very early stages. This is a new design challenge for you, and I think it's an exciting one, and I hope you do too. You'll find all the lowdown on the ClearVision website, so do go there and find out more. Good luck with it all.